This winter could be the turning point everyone has feared. The brutal cold is attacking the front lines with relentless force. How long can Ukraine withstand these icy assaults? Russia's strategy is clear: devastate Ukraine's energy infrastructure daily, plunging cities like Kyiv into darkness and cold. Yet, as snow piles up and blizzards rage, one critical detail gets overlooked. Ukraine has faced the cruelest winters for nearly 4 years, survivors hardened by frostbite and deprivation. But what about the Russian oppressors? On the other side, the Kremlin has stood firm, bolstered by propaganda that winter is Moscow's strongest shield. The coldest season has been their secret weapon, ensuring invincibility. Or so they thought. By 2026, that icy alliance begins to fracture. The winter's wrath revealed its true face, blanketing the battlefield in pure white, transforming legends into explosive chaos. What was once a shield is now a ticking time bomb in the heart of Kremlin power. For Ukraine, the piercing cold presents only a tough challenge, but for Russia, it turns into a deadly equation, one impossible to solve. When the snow finally melts, the Kremlin might already have depleted its resources. The Russian treasury, once overflowing, has fallen into a $52 billion abyss, drained by endless war. Yet, Putin repeats history's biggest mistake, mobilizing 710,000 troops into an icy, overstretched campaign. Is it even feasible to command such a vast force during a brutal winter with a shrinking budget? This story unfolds how Russia, wielding its legendary winter as a weapon, risks freezing both its military might and economy to death. The first blow to Putin's campaign lands right here. The Russian command crosses the most deadly rule in modern warfare: never send an army into a conflict that your logistics cannot sustain. Ukrainian and Western intelligence confirm it. Russia increased its forces by 20%, reaching 710,000 soldiers. On paper, a vast tidal wave of troops looks unstoppable, ready to paint the battlefield red. But, on the ground, it's a doomed crowd, decaying under the weight of frost and failure. In winter, the terrain is merciless, the fuel, supplies, and calories needed to keep soldiers alive triple compared to summer. Adding hundreds of thousands more mouths to an already strained supply chain turns this invasion into a nightmare. Let's zoom in on the Pokrovsk front. Russia's human wave tactics have been months in motion. Yet, enlarging this force only worsens the logistical chaos. Imagine soldiers shivering in inadequate winter uniforms, trying to fight with generators sputtering in the cold, their fuel running low. Most critically, keeping tanks like the T-90 operational at -20 degrees, practically impossible without proper maintenance, becomes an insurmountable challenge. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops weaponize the extreme cold. They target truck routes behind enemy lines, fuel depots and supply trucks, the lifelines for the Russian army. Cold and icy roads halt Russian logistics. Fuel tanks and ammunition trucks become sitting ducks for precision strikes by Ukrainian drones. A battalion without fuel is just frozen metal and wasted money. Reports emerge from the battlefield: Russian units, cut off from supplies, surrender without involvement. Their vehicles freeze in place. The soldiers, unprepared and poorly equipped, retreat into trenches with Soviet-era gear, trying desperately to stay warm. Each frozen body and broken machine signals the failure of the Kremlin's doctrine: quantity over quality. While Russia's troops battle the bitter cold and frozen terrain, Moscow's leaders face a far deadlier freezing and economic collapse. Napoleon's famous adage echoes here: war demands endless money. But Putin's coffers evaporate. The national budget shows a staggering deficit, $34.5 billion in 2024, jumping to $52 billion in just 10 months of 2025. Experts warn it could reach $70 billion by 2026. From where does Russia find such money? Oil and gas revenues, the core of their war funds, have plummeted by a third since last year. Every dip in global prices slices billions from Moscow's coffers. The Kremlin now burns through its national welfare fund, its last financial safety net, at an alarming rate. This economic hemorrhage hits the everyday Russian citizen hardest. Inflation spirals beyond official figures. Living standards plummet. Taxes rise, social programs vanish, and the currency's value deflates daily. The middle class crumbles. Russia's entire economic system teeters on the brink of recession, worse than the Soviet Union's final collapse. This is more than an economic crisis, it's a systemic failure. The government's essential functions grind to a halt. Now, focus shifts to the point where these crises collide. This winter is not just cold weather, it's a reveal of the regime's deepest weaknesses. The war's financial and military strategies are failing simultaneously. Imagine a country unable to sustain its army in the icy grip of winter. Imagine a government incapable of feeding and arming its soldiers or paying its own people. The deadlock is a deadly trap: frozen front lines, starving populations, and a desperate regime caught in a double bind. The balloon of Russian power deflates before our eyes. The direst problem? Money, no matter how much is printed, cannot buy the modern technology needed to keep logistics alive. Western microchips, advanced systems, they're beyond reach due to sanctions and cutoffs. Russia cannot modernize its military or repair its crippled supply chains. This strategic stalemate leaves the country more vulnerable than ever. Moscow's claim of being a superpower dissolves in the cold reality. It relies heavily on external support, selling oil at a loss to China, trading ammunition with North Korea. Russia's dependence intensifies, now a satellite in a harsh geopolitical landscape. External reliance replaces self-sufficiency. Back home, families watch loved ones frozen in snow, casualties mounting in silence. In cities, inflation rages like a wildfire. The pain is visceral, felt at every dinner table, every storefront, every breath lost in the icy air. The Kremlin's narrative that all is well crumbles under the weight of abandoned tanks, rising prices, and broken promises. This winter has exposed every crack in Russia's facade. The regime's survival hinges on illusions, yet the harsh cold and economic realities reveal the truth. The nation is bleeding, militarily, economically, socially. The last chapter of frozen ambitions is unfolding. The question remains, how long can a regime sustain both a freezing army and a starving population? The answer is slipping further away with each day. As winter's grip tightens, Russia's once mighty veneer of strength erodes. The cracks widen. The state's core begins to splinter. This is the moment where the myth of invincibility shatters, and the cold, both literal and metaphorical, claims its final victory. The winter's sudden grip has exposed a brutal truth. Putin's forces, swollen to 710,000 troops, appear formidable on paper. But the reality inside the icy front lines is anything but. In winter warfare, the terrain itself becomes a weapon. Calories, fuel, and gear requirements triple. Adding hundreds of thousands to an already stretched supply chain? A recipe for disaster. Picture the Pokrovsk front through a microscope. Months of human wave tactics bring wave after wave of soldiers trying to seize vital territory. Yet each new soldier tips the logistical balance toward chaos. Winter gear, uniforms, stoves, generators must be transported across treacherous icy roads. Fuel is the vital pulse that keeps machines alive. Without it, tanks like the T-90 become nothing but heavy statues, frozen and useless, their optical systems shutting down in the biting cold. This is where the Russian miscalculation grows deadly. Instead of ensuring supply lines, Ukrainian commanders see opportunity. Their strategy is simple: attack the lifelines, the supply trucks. On icy roads, maneuverability shrinks to near impossibility. Fuel tankers, running low on protection, are hunted down by Ukrainian drones with surgical precision. Every fuel truck caught behind enemy lines becomes a pile of frozen machinery, worthless. Russian soldiers, lacking proper winter equipment, suffer hypothermia in trenches. They try to stay warm in Soviet-era gear, but their efforts are hopeless against the cold, the snow, and the constant threat. Reports from the front reveal the catastrophic results. Units cut off from supply surrender without a fight. Not because they run out of ammunition, but because their vehicles freeze solid. The soldiers inside, exposed, cold, desperate, face hypothermia rather than combat. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian army exploits this weakness, turning the frozen landscape into a death trap for Russian logistics. The devastating irony is clear. Putin's attempt to escalate by increasing his force size has backfired spectacularly. Instead of a relentless wave, he sent a bloated army into a winter nightmare. The logistical system, already fragile, has collapsed under the weight of its own size. It's a mirrored failure: an army too large to sustain in these temperatures, too stretched to supply, too weak against modern technological tactics. But this is only the beginning. The true collapse lies ahead. As the cold intensifies, the supply lines freeze, the engines refuse to start, and the army's backbone shatters. The first signs are already visible: frozen tanks, surrendered units, and soldiers succumbing to hypothermia. The winter is claiming its toll, not just on Russia's armies but on the entire war effort. And behind the scenes, Moscow faces a different kind of death. The monetary reserves, drained by soaring war costs, are drying up. A country once boasting superpower status now struggles just to keep its soldiers alive, both physically and financially. The frozen soldiers' bodies and the empty treasuries form an unforgiving landscape of defeat. The question remains, can Russia recover from this cold, brutal lesson? Or has winter, in its icy grip, delivered a final blow to Putin's ambitions? The answer is written in ice, blood, and broken budgets, laying bare the harsh reality that sometimes, nature's coldest weapon is the most devastating of all. Imagine the Russian army's mighty tanks, frozen relics in the harsh Ukrainian winter. Engines that refuse to turn at -20 degrees. Crews shivering inside, optical systems blind from ice. Ukrainian FPV drones striking at fuel tankers and ammo trucks with deadly precision behind enemy lines. This isn't just a logistical slip, it's a fracture cracking Russia's financial core. President Putin spends $1 billion daily on this war, with no more funds to fuel it. The collapse worsens as revenues tumble. Oil and gas profits evaporate at a staggering 34%. Now picture this: a tank battalion without fuel isn't a weapon of war, it's scrap metal worth millions, useless and frozen. Far from the battlefield, reports from Kucher-Rivyar reveal the grim reality. A Russian unit, supply lines severed, surrendered without firing a shot. Not from lack of bullets, but because vehicles iced over, soldiers gripped by hypothermia's icy claws. Their breath fogging in the biting cold, skin numbing against frostbitten trenches. No modern gear, just Soviet-era hand-me-downs to fend off the chill. Yet Ukraine's thermal drones spot them easily, warm bodies glowing like beacons in the snowy void. How did Russia's obsession with sheer numbers backfire so brutally? Their doctrine slammed into technology's unyielding barrier and winter's merciless laws. 710,000 troops aren't Moscow's triumph, they're a relentless drain, multiplying daily needs to the brink of exhaustion. As frontline warriors endure the physical freeze, Moscow's leaders confront a colder threat, the hollow platter of emptying vaults. Remember Napoleon's words: war demands three things: money, money, and yet more money. Putin holds none. War costs soar astronomically, Kremlin inflows plummet. Numbers expose the truth, defying spin for a portrait of insolvency. Even Russia's finance ministry data, possibly skewed, can't mask the catastrophe. In 2024, deficits hit $34.5 billion, called manageable. But in 2025's first 10 months, it leaped to $52 billion, with experts forecasting $70 billion by 2020's excess close. Rhetoric spiraled into crises, economic crises morphing into systemic breakdowns, leaving Russia's foundation fractured beyond repair. Is this the winter that shatters the bear's grip forever? Or will Putin conjure one last illusion to survive? The economic crisis in Russia is spiraling out of control. In 2024, their budget deficit was around $34.5 billion. The Kremlin claimed it was manageable. But by the first 10 months of 2025, it surged to $52 billion. Experts warn that by the end of 2026, this hole could reach $70 billion. That's not just a setback, it's a catastrophic collapse of the country's financial core. Putin's government is hemorrhaging money. They're spending $1 billion daily on Ukraine. Yet, they can't finance this endless war anymore. The main source of revenue, oil and gas profits, is collapsing rapidly. Data from November 2025 reveals a 34% drop compared to the previous year, nearly a third gone. Just one sliding oil price wiped out $3.5 billion in a single day. The Kremlin is emptying its national welfare fund, the so-called rainy day reserve, desperately trying to cover the shortfall. But that fund isn't infinite. The economic bleeding is visible everywhere, on the streets, in homes, in markets. Putin's war economy is turning into a debt nightmare, mortgaging the nation's future. Inflation skyrockets beyond official figures. The central bank hikes interest rates, but war expenses keep the fire burning. The middle class is quietly slipping into extinction. Russians face impossible choices: either buy winter boots for soldiers or pay wages in city factories. Budget data confirms what we see: Putin is sacrificing his own people. Taxes rise, social programs vanish, and the ruble is losing value daily. The economic system is sliding into a deep recession, far worse than the fall of the Soviet Union. This isn't just a crisis, it's a total breakdown of the state's core functions. Now, consider the bigger picture. The intersection of collapsing finances and freezing frontlines signals something ominous. Russia's military and economic systems are crumbling simultaneously. The regime's survival strategy, built on strength, resources, and patriotic propaganda, has failed spectacularly. The tough winter hasn't just slowed their advance. It has exposed the cracks in the entire foundation. This winter might be the turning point, a moment when Moscow's illusions are shattered by the bitter truth: their system can no longer sustain this war or their people. The question remains, how long can this facade hold before everything collapses? Imagine this, a superpower crumbling under the weight of its own failures. Tanks frozen solid at -20 degrees, soldiers shivering in the snow, while families back home scrape by on empty wallets. Did you know Russia's defense has become a cruel joke, leaving its army as vulnerable as a child in a blizzard? From apocalyptic budget black holes to generals begging for scraps, this is the shocking truth of how winter 2026 could end Putin's grip forever. But wait, how did we get here? And what if the thaw reveals an empire that's already bankrupt beyond repair? 342 characters. In the previous part, we saw Russia's economy spiraling into a recession deeper than the Soviet collapse, a systemic breakdown where basic state functions grind to a halt, leaving homes in darkness and pockets empty. Now, let's zoom out for a broader view. Picture the roaring winds of Eastern Europe, carrying the sharp bite of frost that stings the skin. These aren't just cold snaps, they're the clash of two colossal crises merging like thunderclouds over a battlefield. For Russia, this winter isn't some fleeting weather storm or a minor budget hiccup. It's the brutal moment when the regime's playbook crumbles, exposing a state where both military might and wealth have imploded at once. Imagine soldiers wrapped in tattered cloaks, their breath fogging in the air as they huddle for warmth, while Kremlin halls echo with the hollow clink of draining coffers. We call this a deadly trap, history's grim roll. No power endures a frozen frontline army paired with starved civilians at home. Ever. What shocking secret does the front lines hide? The one that could humiliate Moscow's mighty generals? As we delve deeper, concrete facts hit harder than artillery shells. That gaping $52 billion budget void in Russia? It's paired with 710,000 troops braving bone-chilling temperatures this winter, raw proof of a regime cornered. The acrid smell of diesel fumes lingers, but fuel is scarce, leaving boots sinking into icy mud with a gritty crunch. This isn't about lacking funds alone, it's the terrifying reality that Moscow can't plug the leak. Rubles flood from printers, rustling like dry leaves in a storm, yet they can't summon Western ships or shields for supply routes. The frozen earth squeaks underfoot as trucks bog down, vulnerable to unseen strikes. This gridlock paints Russia as a wounded giant on the world stage, claims of superpower glory now exposed as hollow boasts. Is this the ultimate twist, the fall of an empire derailed by its own stubborn pride? Shifting focus, Moscow's lifeline now clings to distant shadows. The clang of machinery in factories fades as workers shiver, the faint whiff of stale bread from rationed diets permeates city streets. Dependence on Beijing and Pyongyang? No longer strategy, it's pure survival, oxygen tubes pumping life into a collapsing body. Russia peddles oil to China at rock-bottom prices, bloodletting profits, while ammunition pleas echo to North Korea like anguished whispers. This spirals beyond isolation into full reliance, chains rattling with each deal. Yet the home shatter point cuts deepest. Families clutch letters with trembling hands, the salty tang of tears mixing with the bitter chill. As sons' bodies return rigid from the freeze or vanish entirely. The war's toll? Palpable agony in kitchens where pots simmer empty, wallets thinned by crushing price hikes. The Kremlin-spun tales of triumph melt under stark truths, fuel-starved tanks entombed in sub-zero dark, inflation raging at 20%, eroding dreams as surely as erosion carves stone canyons. Can you feel the dread, the irreversible slide where loyalty frays and rebellion stirs? What if the thaw doesn't free Russia, but drowns it in an ocean of unpaid debts? Cooking smoke rises thin over frostbitten fields, the distant rumble of tracked vehicles muffled by snowdrifts. But against this, a piercing question haunts: how did Putin's unwavering march lead to this humiliating endgame? Picture him, decades ago, in a lavish hall awash with applause, the clink of champagne flutes and scent of wood smoke from grand fires, promising invincibility. That memory, a sensory ghost warmth on the skin, the earthy musk of polished leather chairs, now mocks the present's icy grip. Then, as now, the myth of winter as ally roared strong, but 2026 shatters it irreparably. Ukraine adapts to harsh frosts, forging endurance over years, while Russia faces a new calculus: when blizzards lift, those frontline tanks? They could sit inert, Moscow's purse bled dry at $52 billion. Napoleon's folly repeats itself, 710,000 amassed not for glory, but peril. Managers grapple with this frigid chaos on shrinking supplies, a logistical abyss. Can a regime finance a blizzard-bound horde while its foundations crumble? This tale unfolds Russia's self-sabotage. Wielding winter's legend only to freeze its own forces into defeat. What if the cold isn't their ally, but a traitor turning victory to ashes? Zooming into battlefronts, the earlier officer's vision, sweat on brows, maps pinned under dim lights, now clashes with blinding whiteouts. Pokrovsk, human waves charge through piercing winds, boots crunching packed snow, the metallic tang of gunsmoke mixing with frost's sharp sting. Additional forces balloon logistics from strain to shatter, calories, gear, fuel tripling in demand. To shield from chills, uniforms scratching against raw skin, stoves hissing with scarce warmth, generators growling faintly. Yet convoys falter on slick paths, mud and ice yanking vehicles like invisible hands. Fuel tankers and ammo haulers drift vulnerably, hunted by precise drones. A T-90 engine sputters in the freeze, crew numbing as optics glaze over. Deprived, battalions become relic hulks, millions in dead metal. Kucher Rivyar echoes horror, units surrender not amid gunfire, but hypothermia's silent creep, trenches cramped with Soviet gear. Thermal scans spot huddled groups like beacons in void. Quantity doctrine crashes unary against tech's edge, 710,000 no multiplier, just drain, depleting fast. As front combatants endure flesh-biting cold, Moscow's elites confront harsher freeze, empty vaults ominous creak. Napoleon's dictum rings, war feasts on wealth, and Putin's tables barren. Costs soar astronomically, revenues nosedive. 2024 deficit, $34.5 billion, massed as tame. 2025's first 10 months? Explodes to $52 billion, heading towards $70 billion by 2020's excess end. Backbone fracture. Daily $1 billion burns unfunded. Core source oil, gas shrinks 34%, prices slashing $3.5 billion at once. National Welfare Fund depletes, not infinite. Economy warps into debt mire, mortgaging tomorrow. Inflation surges unchecked, rates hikes fizzle versus burns. Middle class quietly extinguishes. Choice brutal, boots for soldiers or wages for factory folk. Budgets declare it, show people sacrifice tax hikes, cuts, ruble rot, power eroded. Deeper spiral than Soviet fall, systemic halt. Narrative shatters against fuel-less tanks, 20% spiral. Future squandered. Is this Putin's first true loss, the moment winter allies not with him, but against his crumbling throne? What betrayal lurks in the melting snow, the spark of an inevitable implosion? Imagine a world where a nation's legendary shield turns into a shattering blade of betrayal. Here's the chilling twist: as Putin's winter offensive ramps up with 710,000 soldiers freezing in the snow, Russia's economy plunges into a $52 billion abyss so deep, it might bury the Kremlin itself forever. Can one icy season really topple a superpower? In the shadows of this brutal war, Russia's prized protector, winter, has betrayed its master. What was once a Moscow myth, a shield against invaders, now chokes the Kremlin's forces with unrelenting frost. Snow blankets eastern battlefields, but for Ukraine's resilient troops, it's just another harsh hurdle they've conquered for nearly 4 years. For the Russian army, though, this freeze morphs into a deadly math problem, draining lives and resources alike. Picture this: the Kremlin's generals defy the golden rule of warfare: never unleash an army logistics can't sustain. By swelling their ranks by 20%, they've gathered 710,000 souls on Ukrainian soil, a horde that sounds invincible on paper. Yet, in the piercing cold, every soldier's basic needs, calories, fuel, gear, triple. It's a logistical nightmare, where adding troops geometrically explodes the burden on already strained supply chains. Zoom in on the Pokrovsk front, where Russia's human waves crash against icy realities. With the troop surge, demands for winter coats, heaters, generators, and fuel skyrocket. Trucks snaking through snowy trails become targets. Ukrainian drones, precise as surgeons, pick off fuel tankers and ammo haulers. A mighty T-90 tank? Without starting fluids in -20 degrees. It sits frozen, optics blinded by ice, crew hypothermic within. Suddenly, millions in metal melt into useless scrap. Reports from Kutcher Rivyar paint the horror. A cut-off unit surrenders not from bullets, but starvation and numbness. Their Soviet-era gear offers meager warmth, glowing like beacons for Ukraine's thermal drones. Quantity over quality? Russia's doctrine shatters against modern tech and winter's cruel laws. These 710,000 aren't power, they're a growing weight, devouring daily resources. Now, the deeper chill creeps in, fanning from the front to Moscow's core. As troops shiver in trenches, leaders grapple with treasury voids echoing like distant thunder. Money funds armies, as history teaches, and Putin lacks it. War costs soar astronomically, revenues plummet. Budget deficits balloon to $52 billion in the first 10 months of 2025, projected to hit $70 billion by year's end. Oil and gas profits shrank 34%, wiping out $3.5 billion in one price dip. Russia raids its national welfare fund, mortgaging futures in a debt vice. Inflation spirals, swallowing wages and savings. Factories idle as soldiers beg for boots, citizens for bread. Taxes climb, social nets tear, the ruble crumbles against the dollar. This isn't mere downturn, it's Soviet collapse redux, a systemic breakdown halting state functions. The fractures merge at winter's crossroads, a regime's survival plan crumbling. Military failure meets economic ruin in a double bind no empire escapes. $52 billion voids plus 710,000 exposed troops? No reversal in sight. Rubles can't buy Western tech to shield logistics. Propaganda masks vulnerability, dependence on China and North Korea screams isolation. This winter exposes the hollow bear, hungry, trapped, unable to stir. Putin's gamble squandered Russia's fate, leaving no winning army or prosperous peace. Unsustainable tremors hint at collapse. Ukraine's endurance? Victory. Russia's plight? Economic military doom. General Winter no longer aids Russia, it accuses. History opposes the frozen $710,000 and $52 billion quakes. The bear starves in its cave, furred yet failing. As debts mount, even rubles evaporate. Winter's bill arrives, not just to commanders or coffers, but to distant homes. In Moscow's icy suburbs, St. Petersburg's frost-gripped blocks, Novosibirsk's blizzard-blasted alleys, Russians feel the toll. Frontline collapse mirrors civilian decay, birthing urban hypothermia. Soviet heating systems groan under fatigue, pipes bursting like threats. Podolsk's 150,000 frozen households last year? A harbinger. What catastrophic freezes await now, as infrastructure crumbles, unsolved by funds redirected to missiles? Families endure sons' lifeless returns or vanishings, wallets thinned by spikes. War's cost pierces kitchens, streets, hearts. Picture the sting, fathers lighting wood stoves for fleeting warmth, mothers hoarding meager groceries against rising costs, children shivering under piles of blankets. The scent of burning wood mixes with despair, touch of numb fingers reminds everyone this agony stems from a diverted budget, missiles over maintenance. Western sanctions bar repairs, software. Without funds or parts, boiling systems falter. Plunging cities into darkness and ice. This isn't policy, it's betrayal. Can such fractures hold, or will the whole edifice shatter? Families mourn frozen sons or unknown fates, cities groan under inflation's vice. Putin's plan, that everything unfolds perfectly, crumbles before -20 tanks and rampant rises. He bartered Russia's tomorrow for the war, yielding neither victor nor solvent peace. Unsteady tremors presage total implosion. Ukraine's survival? Heroic win. Russia's? Fiscal defeats and military ice traps. Winter renounces allegiance. History turns foe. 710,000 trapped in ice, $52 billion ruins foundations. The bear doesn't slumber, it starves, immobilized. Wars drain rubles, halting reverses. The toll? Paid in far-off freezes. Frontline logistics fail reflects domestic ruin, sparking urban chills. Aged infra like frontline tanks decays. Pipes burst in Podolsk, freezing 150,000. A mere glance at winters ahead. Because war budgets fueled city blasts, not repairs. Sanctions block parts, software. Systems surrender to ice, unbearable fatigue. Citizens face unnatural colds, unmendable. When winter truly bites, will Russia's core fracture utterly, or spark unexpected revolts against the chill? As countless troops succumb to frost, the Kremlin's economic heart pumps weekly, deficits hemorrhaging billions. Army logistics starve, exposing vulnerabilities no rubles remedy. Depending on allies, selling oil at losses, begging munitions, Russia edges toward full dependence. Home fractures deepen, families watching sons' frosted cadavers or voids return, streets inflamed by costs. Putin's all-good tale shatters on ice tanks, soaring percentages. He incinerated futures for battle, netting no winning force, no funding serenity. Unsuitable quakes herald wide falls. Winter? No Russian speaker. 710,000 ensnared in snows, $52 billion shatters bases. The bear neither dozes nor emerges, but dwindles. As conflicts rage, not one coin remains for halt. Ducheable winter's reckoning extends to urban crises, where heating fails mirror battle breakdowns. Soviet relic systems succumb to wear. Burst pipes in Podolsk, chilling 150,000, foreshadow greater freezes. War evaded money on weaponry, not fixes. Sanctions forbid spares, programs. Infrastructures capitulate to cold, unfixable strains. Inhabitants confront stark freezes, irreversible. As temperatures plummet, might Russia's soul shatter, igniting unforeseeable uprisings? Will Putin improvise an exit, or haunt the demise? In the shadows of Soviet-era heating systems, crumbling under metal fatigue, just like frontline tanks facing icy freezes, pipe bursts in Podolsk last winter stranded 150,000 people in bone-chilling homes, a grim preview of winter's wrath to come. Picture this, the bitter sting of frost creeping through cracked walls, the acrid smell of rusty pipes hissing failure, feet numb against concrete floors as radios blare hollow promises. Is Putin's nuclear bluff thawing under the very cold he once weaponized? Humidity-laden air thickens, carrying whispers of defiance where propaganda crumbles. The regime's gamble? Pouring billions meant for crumbling city veins into missiles raining on Ukrainian skies, turning home hearths into forgotten battlegrounds. Sub-zero winds howl outside, while inside, shivering families huddle over flickering candles. What if the war's toll wasn't just distant explosions, but the silent siege starving your own hearth and home? Western sanctions bite deep, spare parts for boiler repairs vanish like smoke, software updates for pumps stall and digital deadlock. Imagine fingers blue and trembling, unable to turn a valve or ignite a spark, citizens awakening to the lie that Great Russia supplies is empty rhetoric, failing to stave off starvation or silence winter's relentless invasion. Power blackouts shroud neighborhoods in inky void, heating crises spark riots swifter than any frontline rout. In darkened, frigid apartments, survival instincts clash with simmering fury. Perish the threats of neo-Nazis or strategic depths. When the only depths seem endless wage freezes in vanishing warmth. Yet the turmoil seeps deeper, unraveling threads binding Russia's vast expanse. Railways, the empire's pumping veins, clog with lethal stagnation. Sanctions choke high-quality ball bearings for wagon wheels, replacements from elsewhere shatter under Siberian blizzards and crushing freight. Wheels grinding to halts, the shriek of metal on metal piercing frozen air, civilian journeys halt, military convoys bottleneck in a tangle of futility. Airspace decays in parallel peril. Boeing and Airbus fleets cannibalized, parts pilfered from one to glue another alive, fleets dwindling daily, every takeoff a gamble against catastrophe. Planes claw through turbulent skies, engines coughing under stress, yet the aerial lifelines fray, tethering mines and remote outposts to a weakening Moscow core. Hear the drones of idle propellers, feel the ground vibrate with unfulfilled departures, an empire unraveling outward, its grip loosening in a blizzard of isolation. What unforeseen twist haunts Putin's winter gamble? As soldiers freeze and cities shiver. Russia faces not invasion, but implosion, from cash drains to calibrated strikes, where drones hum victory's cold tune. Will this frostbite to the nation's soul reveal the emperor's naked exposure? Fingernails claw against icy panes, as truths scream louder than Arctic gales, whispering the end of an illusion, in a symphony of shattering echoes. As the biting cold intensifies, the risks of flying in Russia skyrocket. Icy runways and frozen hydraulic systems turn every takeoff into a potential catastrophe. The recent delay of nearly 300 flights at Moscow's Vnukovo airport is proof. Boarding a plane in Russia now feels as dangerous as stepping onto the battlefield itself. The country's economic desperation has pushed the Kremlin into reckless decisions, both on land and at sea. An aging fleet of insurance-unprotected tankers, called the Shadow Fleet, navigates the treacherous Baltic Sea, risking environmental disaster and political chaos. These vessels, patched together from scrap, are now floating time bombs amid the fierce winter storms. With every passing day, the threat grows more tangible. An accident could trigger a diplomatic shutdown, halting all oil exports. It's a disaster waiting to explode, threatening not just Russia's economy but the entire region's ecology. Putin's gamble with energy as a weapon has backfired spectacularly. His attempt to wield oil like a sword has turned into an explosive boomerang, blowing up in his face. This winter of 2026 may go down in history as Russia's ultimate freezing point. The economy is staggering under a $52 billion deficit, drained further by collapsing oil revenues. The army's logistical chains are crumbling, soldiers left stranded in freezing trenches. Meanwhile, Russian infrastructure is cracking, powerful cities shuddering in the cold, lights flickering out. The grand vision of empire has disintegrated in the icy grip of reality. What once seemed invincible now appears fragile, shattered by ruthless winter storms and economic collapse. With each passing day, the question grows louder: is this the end of Russia's ambitions? Or will the icy wasteland finally silence the regime for good? The answer might lie beneath the snow, buried deep beneath the frozen surface of a once mighty empire. In the heart of Moscow's bitter chill, do rotting lights flicker out across frostbitten homes, casting eerie shadows that whisper of collapse? With heaters failing and coffers empty, Russia's citizens grapple with a nightmare that could shatter the regime's grip forever. Did Putin's empire just bite off more than it can chew, turning victory dreams into icy tombs? As grand imperial visions crumbled under the weight of harsh, cold, gray reality, Ukraine stands firm, defending its soil with unbreakable resolve. Russia crumbles, lacking any clear voice to justify its battles, its enemies, or the staggering sacrifices. The glow of streetlights fades into darkness. Heaters sputter silent, their vents expelling only stale, musty air. Empty coffers clink with emptiness, a hollow echo in the void. For Russians, this season brings no peaceful slumber. Instead, it unfurls as an unyielding nightmare, jaws clenched against the biting cold, skin prickling with goosebumps from unpaid bills. How many more nights will pass before the thaw reveals shattered illusions? And from this vortex, awakening promises not warmth, but a profound hush, that eerie quiet signaling the regime's final gasp. No longer does the conflict rage solely in Ukraine's fields. It pulses deep within Russia's frozen core, veins throbbing with unseen fractures, hearts pounding against escalating despair. What if this icy grip isn't Russia's ally, but its undoing, a shocking betrayal turning propaganda into phantoms? The war infiltrates every frozen breath, every unspoken fear. A season where survival instinct clashes with crushing humiliation. For shocked citizens, survival smells like burnt-out generators and tastes like defeat. Can Putin's legacy endure this glacial wave, or will it thaw into irrelevance? Yet, as the blizzard howls louder, louder still, a monumental twist emerges. What if this winter doesn't just wage war on the battlefield, but ignites a revolution in the shadows? Russia's heart, iced over and cracking, might be on the verge of exploding outward, shattering chains once thought unbreakable. In this epic finale, the regime's foundations shudder, poised for a fall more dramatic than any scripted tale. The silence deepens, anticipation builds for the thunderous collapse ahead.